Ma'am, shall we start?
Yeah, we shall start now.
Okay, ma'am.
Teacher. Hi, ma'am.
Okay. Before we start, please let us know whether we are audible or not.
I can hear you. This is Abdul.
Okay, sir, thank you. Please put off your video and audio during the session for better experience.
A dream is just a dream. A goal is a dream with a plan and a deadline. Good evening, one and all. I am Niranjana Suresh.
And myself, Aya Sheetal from First BA Economics, Government College for Women, Thiruvananthapuram.
This is the 18th webinar in the series of Capacity Building Program 2020-21 conducted by Ecowings.
We welcome dignitaries, teachers, friends, research scholars from other universities, and all who are present here with immense rapture to the international webinar on digital transformation and productivity.
Before we move on, may I remind you to put off your mics and videos. At the outset, I invite Aparna for the prayer.
Sharanam bhava karunamai kurudina dayalu. Sharanam bhava karunamai kurudina dayalu. करुणारसवरुणालय करिराज कृपालो करुणारसवरुणालय करिराज कृपालो अधुना खलु विधिना मयि सुधिया सुरपरिदम् मधुसूदन मधुसूदन करमामकदुरिदम् शरणं भव करुणामयि कुरुदीन दयाळु शरणं भव करुणामयि कुरुदीन दयाळु. Thank you.
Thank you, Aparna. Now, may I invite Head of the Economics Department, Dr. Uma Jyoti V, our Uma ma'am, who is the true spirit of Ecowings, for the welcome speech. Ma'am, please.
Thank you, Niranjana. I hope I am audible. Good
Yes,
evening.
ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, respected Dr. Abdul Azeez Erumban and dear friends. Hearty welcome to the 18th webinar organized by the PG Department of Economics and Research Center, Government College for Women. And this is the 18th webinar organized in the pandemic period. And we are so happy to make this edition international by the inspiring presence of an outstanding scholar like Dr. Abdul Azeez Erumban. The theme is digital transformation and productivity. We know that this is an age of digital transformation, perhaps the mark of fourth industrial revolution. Or we are in an age of advanced digital technologies. And regarding the adoption and use sides, something which was optional has changed to almost inevitable thanks to the pandemic age. And the digital age is truly upon us. Digitalization is at the center stage like never before. And digital transformation is, of course, broader than digitalization. It is not only about the technology assets, but it is also about the people, the processes, etc. New digital ecosystems are emerging, and this is, of course, these are reshaping the consumer producer interactions across different sectors. But as you know, there are differences in diffusion and adoption. It is certain that digital transformation will add more economic value. The impact on productivity is very crucial. And in today's online session, we shall get connected to the conceptual dimensions of productivity in addition to the impact of digital transformation on productivity. And I hope the session will inspire many of you to explore it further. It's our proud privilege to have a facilitator like Dr. Abdul Azeez to present this topic. His academic specialization and accomplishments are well known. He is an expert in industrial economics and has many globally reputed publications to his credit. But equally remarkable is his academic journey from Kerala to a prestigious university in Europe. Despite his very busy schedules and despite being in another part of the world, he kindly accepted our invitation. So with immense respect and gratitude, we welcome you, sir, Dr. Abdul Azeez Erumbn. I appreciate my dear colleague Sri Rajit for his efforts in making this happen. And much love to the dear coordinators, our first year undergraduate students for this beautiful, meaningful teamwork. Hearty welcome to all participants. Wish you all very fruitful moments here. Thank you.
Thank you, Uma ma'am. I'm profusely elated to take an opportunity to introduce our chief guest of the day. Dr. Abdul Azeez Erumbn is an assistant professor at the University of Groningen, the Netherlands, and a senior research fellow at the Conference Board Europe. He has been teaching and researching at the university since 2009, but moved to the Conference Board as a senior economist in 2013. After more than 6 years of research and counseling experience at the Conference Board, he moved back to the university on a full-time basis in 2020.
Dr. Abdul Azeez sir has published articles in reputed international academic and business journals and has written several blogs, including the reputed Water Knowledge series and the Brookings Future Development series. He has also contributed to many prestigious international conferences. Abdul Azeez sir has a special interest and understanding of issues related to the Indian economy.
At the Conference Board, Azeez sir was in charge of developing a research portfolio around global economic outlook, global productivity comparisons, and global value chain. He was also an active contributor to TCB's research on diversification and productivity in the Gulf Cooperation Council countries.
It's a moment of ecstasy to have you as our research person, sir. We feel honored to hear some words from you. Sir, please.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. 𝙏𝙧𝙖𝙚 and Aparna, that was very fancy welcome. Thank you very much for that. And thank you, Dr. Uma Jyoti, for your kind words and warm welcome. And I really look forward to this. I hope you will all enjoy it. The very fact that I'm talking to you today, sitting 7,000 kilometers away, is a result of digital technologies, the use of which was accelerated, as Dr. Uma Jyoti earlier said, by the COVID-19 pandemic. Indeed, this technology is very disruptive, and it comes with its own drawbacks, but its potential is enormous, and it is going to affect all of us, sometimes negatively, sometimes positively, and in my opinion, mostly positively. So in this presentation, I will try to introduce you to the productivity in digital age. Thank you, Rajit, for inviting me to speak to your students, and thank you all for being here to listen to me today. In fact, when Rajit asked me if I could speak to you, I did not think twice. I lived in Thiruvananthapuram, and I have great and fond memories of Thiruvananthapuram and CDS in particular. And also about the topic, which is very close to my heart at the moment, because I'm working on it currently with a number of colleagues here in Europe and the United States. However, I had no idea what is your level of understanding of some of the concepts in productivity literature. So I asked Rajit also actually about that. So I thought I will spend my time mostly discussing very basic concepts and no sophisticated ones, literally almost no mathematics or econometrics. along with some insights from some of the recent works I have been doing along with some colleagues. The problem is that the literature on productivity is so vast and large, and it is hard to cover everything in a small, for even a small portion of it in a small talk like 1 hour talk. But still, let us try. I will speak mostly from a macroeconomic perspective, even though there is a lot of literature on microeconomic productivity. I will hardly touch that, but I will talk mostly on macroeconomic perspective. So let me share my screen with you so that I can share the slides. Can you confirm if you can see my slides in presentation mode?
Yes, sir.
Okay, in full screen, right? Okay. So the topic which I am going to discuss today is digital transformation and productivity. So today my plan is to start with a little survey in which I would like to hear from you what your thoughts are about. It will take just a minute, and all that you need is your internet device, and I'm sure you all have it in front of you. Then I will explain the concept of productivity and its importance a little bit. Subsequently, I will speak a bit about digital transformation, and finally, how digital technologies affect productivity, and some evidence from India's context and also from some global context. And I wish and I hope we will have some time left for questions afterward. I already spoke to Rajit about it. I think it is very important that I like to hear from you, and I would like to get your questions because asking questions is more difficult than answering questions when you do research. So let's go to the survey. The question I wanted to ask you is this: 10 years from now, when many of you will be doing something somewhere in the world, what do you think the most important event that will have changed the world? I have a remark here. Please note, it is not a change that you would like to see in the world. It is not a change that any ideology, if you believe in, that tells you what it ought to be, but it is the change that you really think that will really happen in the world, given the way the world works now. So to answer this survey, all that you need to go do is please go to this website, slido.com, slido.com, and join the survey using the code 85901. So I will wait for a minute. So now it's 1:41 in my time. I think for you, I think it's 6:50, 16 perhaps. And then I will wait for a minute, and then we will see what you think. Please let me know if it is not working well. If let me know, then we will see how we can manage it. I see nobody has answered yet. Does it mean that it is not working for you? Digital technologies are not working? Okay, so I see someone.
Yes, sir, it's working.
It's working. Ah, okay, I see it's working now.
Could you please say the name of the site again?
Yes. I will also type it here. sido.com, and the number is 85905. Okay, I think I will close the survey now because of the time. And let me see how much answers we got. So I have 10 answers actually, and 40% of that means says that digitization of societies will be changing the world in 10 years. And another 25%, oh, it's moving still. Okay, I think you can keep answering because I will go on, but it looks like most of you think that digitization of societies is going to change. So that's something which we are also going to talk about today. So let me move on. You can continue answering it, but we will see the results later if we have time. Now, let me come to the question of what is productivity. So I'm going to explain that in a very basic way. Suppose your teacher Rajit and I were given an assignment. Rajit finishes the assignment in 2 days and produces a high quality report. I finish the same with a similar quality, but in 4 days. That implies Rajit is double productive as I am. That is precisely what productivity is. How much output you can produce within a given time using the available resources. Now let us transform that into a more realistic economic situation. If a firm produces more output using the same amount of inputs compared to another firm, the first firm is more productive than the second. So that is productivity is all about. So with that background, let us try to define productivity more formally. It is a measure of how efficiently the resources are used to produce output by an individual, a firm, an industry, or an economy. Basically, it is measured as the ratio of amount of the quantity of output produced and the quantity of inputs used in producing it. So it is a quantity measure. It's not a price measure. It is a quantity measure. And when I say inputs, what I mean is that it can be the number of hours workers spend on producing it. It can be the number of hours a machine is operated. It can be the amount of energy used in the production process, etc. So any kind of inputs, as you know, which is used in the production process, and the amount of output which you produce with that. So that ratio is simply the productivity measure. But most commonly, we use two different measures of productivity in economic profession. As I mentioned earlier, it is the ratio of the quantity of output to input. So, and when you have only one output and only one input, it is a very simple measure. You just take the ratio of the two. But in reality, that is not the case, because every economy produces thousands of products using multiple inputs: capital, labor, energy, material, services, because you sometimes use auditing services, all those kind of things which are going as inputs into the production process. So we need to aggregate these measures to measure productivity. As you know, in the concept of GDP, gross domestic product, or value added, which we use as economists on a daily basis, we aggregate all goods and services produced in an economy. So, or in a firm. So that basically means that already we have a measure of aggregated output. So now inputs also needs to be aggregated to measure productivity. So you have machines, you have workers, you have energy, you have raw materials, all these things, but they cannot be simply added, right? Because they are different units of measurement. They provide different services. The workers provide different types of services than a machine does. And intermediate inputs gives a different types of inputs into the production process and so on. So that basically means that you need to aggregate them some way by taking into account their differences in their productivity, different individual productivities. So that brings us two different types of productivity. The first is a partial measure of productivity, where we divide the total output of a firm, an industry, or an economy by a specific type of input. For instance, the most common measure you see in the literature is labor productivity. It is measured as the total volume of output produced per hours worked. So, in an hour, how much output you are producing. So, in the absence of the data on hours of work, people use number of employees or workers as a proxy measure. Of course, that approach has a lot of problems, because especially when you have large number of people working on a part-time basis, like in India, because then we may underestimate the productivity, because a worker is completely counted as a complete worker instead of the number of hours he worked actually. But I will not go to those details now, because it's a lot of things which we can discuss. The second measure is a multi-factor productivity measure, or sometimes called the total factor productivity, which is a ratio of output to some sort of aggregated inputs. Suppose we take two inputs, capital and labor. So we aggregate those two inputs in some way. How to aggregate it? That is a bigger literature. There are different ways to do that, but again, I will not go to that today, because our aim today is to go into the impact of digitization. But anyway, all that you need to take from here is that there are two types of productivity which are used in the literature. One is a partial productivity, most commonly the labor productivity, and the other is a multi-factor productivity or total factor productivity, where we take the combined measure of inputs on the denominator when you divide output by input. So with that basic definition, let me introduce a little bit of theory into production here. I'm taking it for granted, or I believe that you are familiar with the concept of production functions, isocons, production possibility curves, and so on in microeconomic theory. A production function is an expression of the technological relationship between output and input. For example, how labor and capital are providing their services to transform intermediate inputs and raw materials into consumable products and services. So that is the kind of relationship which we look into in the production function. So here I have a production function, a typical production function, neoclassical production function. We can criticize that assumptions, but for the simplicity, I take a neoclassical production function here, where I have one single output and one single input. So this can be number of inputs. It can be capital, labor, or anything, but for simplicity, I assume I have only one input. Let us assume that it is labor, and I have one unit of output, which is on the y-axis, and on the x-axis, I have the input, say for simplicity, labor. So the curve is an upward sloping curve, as you can see, because as we use more and more inputs, you can produce more and more output, right? Because if we work more and more hours, that leads to more and more output, we produce more and more output. And also, but it is not a straight line, because as you know, when we use more and more inputs, the marginal output that is being produced by a unit of input declines. The law of diminishing marginal returns on inputs. Just like diminishing marginal utility, when you consume more and more of the same product, your utility declines. In the same way, when you use more and more of the same input, the return that is coming out of that input will decline. So that is the way, that is the reason why it is not a straight line, but it is actually a kind of curve which is moving down at the end of the curve. Now, let us start at point 1. At this point, the firm produces 2 units of output using 3 units of inputs. For instance, with 3 workers, we produce 2 units of output. So here the productivity is 2 by 3 or 0.7. Now, suppose that you increase the employment or the input from 3 to 5 units. So you are now using 5 units of workers instead of 3 units of workers. So we move to point 2, where the output is 2.5, as you can see in the chart. So your output grew from 2 to 2.5, a 25% increase with 2 more additional workers. How did you achieve it? Simply by adding more workers or making your existing workers work more hours. So this is a like, kind of extensive way of growing. So intensive way of growing. You're using your input more intensively, or you're expanding your inputs in the production process. So now let us look at another possibility here, which is point 3. Point 3 is that you still use the same amount of workers, 3 workers, but you produce more output. 3 workers now produce 3 units of output instead of 2 units. So your productivity improved from 0.7 to 1 unit because 3 by 3. How does that work? Because you shift the production function upward, or you improve the overall productivity or technology of your operation. That means you achieve a higher level of output without raising your inputs. That is precisely theoretically what is productivity is. So I'm recapping and reminding you the movement along the production function, that is from point 1 to 2, is simply by adding more inputs. So you are using more resources, while the shift from point 1 to 3 is with increased productivity, that is, you are not using additional resources in this activity. So in reality, what you see is a combination of these two, which is point 4. That is what where we have a combination of 2 and 3. Output grows from 2 to 3.8, where part of the growth comes from input accumulation because your employment has grown from 3 to 5, and the other part is from productivity because you are shifting your production function. When we have real data on inputs and outputs, we can actually separate these 2 different components under some assumptions. As you know, assumptions are not something new to economists because we make a lot of assumptions in everything which we do. So what we need to take from this is that output growth can be achieved either by moving along the production function, that is by adding more and more inputs, or by shifting your production function, that is by improving your productivity. So this upward movement in production function is more sustainable and is driven by more productivity growth, and it happens without adding more input. So it is with no additional cost that is happening. Now, let me take you into more a practical way of how we can implement this in terms of measuring productivity. As I said already, there are simple ways of measuring productivity by taking output and as a ratio of inputs. So, but there are several other ways of measuring productivity. That is a simple measure, especially when you deal with multiple inputs, because you need to aggregate those inputs. I will not go to all the econometrics, sophisticated ways like frontier production function, all kind of catch-up technologies and things like that. But I will show you a very simple measure, which is called growth accounting, in which output growth can be decomposed into contribution from labor productivity growth and employment growth, and then labor productivity growth can be decomposed into further components, including total factor productivity or the multi-factor productivity, which is the combined productivity of all inputs. So this is more practical way of separating productivity and input from input accumulation from output growth. So here again, I'm hoping that you all heard about Robert Solow, a Nobel laureate economist, for his contribution to economic growth theory. Solow had written a seminal paper in 1957 in which he introduced a growth theory where economic growth is a function of investment, employment, and productivity. Later literature pioneered by people like many people, including Dale Jorgensen from Harvard University, with whom I work a lot, fortunately, on a larger project on global productivity. So they developed this model to estimable identities called growth accounting. So in this model, as you can see at the top of the model, this picture, the growth of output is achieved through 2 major factors. You can raise output by making workers work more hours or by improving their productivity. So labor productivity or hours worked. This is just like, for instance, your HOD, Dr. Uma Jyoti, can ask Rajit to teach more hours and increase his teaching deliveries. Alternatively, Rajit can use more innovative ways to teach you, use better technologies and skills, by which he can deliver the same content more effectively. So he can teach the same content, but with less time. So that is productivity, or he can spend more time on teaching you and also increase the teaching content. So that is by increasing work hours. So either he can improve his productivity or he can increase his time. So the question is then, how can he improve labor productivity? So let us go back to the same example, because I'm trying to make it easy for you if you know Rajit. So I hope Rajit will not be offended by this. So why was earlier I told you that in finishing the assignment, Rajit was double productive than me. So let us ask the question, why Rajit was more productive than me in finishing that assignment? A number of factors could be playing here. Perhaps Rajit had a faster computer that helped him to do his calculations faster, while I was waiting for my computer to respond and wasting my time. So that basically means that Rajit had more capital or better quality capital. We call it capital deepening. That is the first thing. So if you have better capital and more capital, more machines, more computer, whatever it is, that can help the workers produce faster and more efficiently. Or it could be that perhaps Rajit had prior experience, or Rajit did a course in using some of the tools to do this assignment. So that basically means that his skills and competencies that helped him better to perform better than me. So then there could be a number of other factors that helped Rajit to be more productive. Perhaps Rajit was more organized. Perhaps Rajit had a better internet connection infrastructure. Perhaps Rajit lives in a city where there is continuous electric supply, where I live in a village where power failure is common. So energy is playing a role. Perhaps Rajit's family was quite supportive, and so he had a tranquil ambience at home, his environment in which he is working. Rajit's parents were doing the same kind of works in the past, so and he was exposed to it. That means his initial endowments. Or maybe Rajit does this every day, and this was just a simple addition to Rajit's daily routine. While for me, it was not part of my bulk portfolio. So it's a kind of scale economies, right? Because Rajit has already been doing this on a bulk scale, and this is just adding to his scale. It does nothing to him. So it was a scale economies for him. It could be any of these, or it could be all of this, which contributes to the overall productivity. So that is what finally, it's like any technology or any ambience, any infrastructure, or any environment, any initial endowments, or any of these factors that could be driving the overall productivity, which we are combining all those into one common measure, which we call the total factor productivity. So I will be using these two concepts, the total factor productivity and the labor productivity, in the rest of the lecture. So you have to understand those two concepts. The labor productivity is simply by the amount of output which produced per hour or per worker. And the total factor productivity is anything that is left out unexplained by capital and skill competencies of the workers, anything that is contributing to labor productivity, which can be technology, which can be investment environment, it can be policies, it can be regulations, or anything scale economies, anything that influence that can be reflected in total factor productivity. So I'm going to skip this slide because I promised you that I will not show you any mathematics, but this I will share the slides if there is interest later, but you can look into this. This is the standard growth accounting equations, where output growth is divided into contribution of capital and labor quality and productivity. So that is basically the same thing which I showed you earlier, but in a more formal mathematical way. Now, let me also remind you a few things. When we talk about productivity and comparing productivity, let me again go back to my previous example. If you know that Rajit finished this assignment in 2 days, it was less helpful than when you say he did so while I took 4 days. So that tells a lot, right? Because that tells you that there is something that I could learn from him, because my productivity was not so much as Rajit's productivity. So what is also interesting to know is that, suppose after 2 years, if Rajit still takes 2 hours for a similar assignment, but I take only 1.5 hours, now I have overtaken Rajit, while he is still stuck with where he was initially. So basically that means that my productivity grew faster than Rajit's. So because my productivity has improved, now there is something for Rajit to learn from me. So these comparisons are more important. So two different ways of looking at productivity performance are comparisons with others. It could be other firms, it could be other countries, it could be other industries. We call this a level comparison. So in this case, if you are far away from the frontier, when I say frontier is the country or the firm or industry that is performing better in terms of achieving productivity, you try to catch up with the leading firms, industries, or countries. So this speed of catch up is often argued to lead to a convergence in productivity across countries or industries or firms. But that is a bigger debate. Again, I'm not going to that. But the thing is that this catch up, if you catch up with the frontier, that helps you to close the gap between productivity between you and the frontier, country, firm, or industry. The second comparison is with one's own history of productivity in time. That is what productivity growth is all about. How fast you are improving your productivity over time. So that is what I compare when what happens in Digit's productivity in 2 years compared to mine. So that's the kind of thing. So most often, policymakers, central banks, governments, and businesses, firms, all are mostly concerned about productivity growth. In fact, if you grow faster, that also helps you to lower the gap with the best performer, because if you're growing faster, that also basically means that you're trying to catch up with the frontier. But you also have to remember that the best performer or the frontier will also grow its productivity. So the speed of your catch up is a function of your initial level, your growth, your own growth, and the frontier's growth. So basically, if you're growing faster than the frontier, you can faster catch up with the frontier. So that is a kind of comparison which you have here. Now, let me give you an example of catch up with the best performing country. The United States in general is one of the best performing countries in terms of productivity, as it is one of the technology leaders in the world, because in most cases it develops the technologies, advanced technologies, and it also implements and adopts those technologies faster than other countries. See, in this chart, I have two charts here. On the left hand side, I have the labor productivity for Korea, which is the yellow bar, in comparisons with United States. And the United States, I am taking it as a benchmark here. So I converted the United States productivity into 100, and then I'm comparing how far the productivity growth, the levels are compared to United States in Korea. So the yellow line is Korea, and you can see how that is changing over time. So what you can see in this chart is that the productivity gap between South Korea and the United States was about 85% in 1950. In other words, an average Korean employer would produce about $6,000 worth output, while an average American would produce $42,000 in 1950. That is, Korean would produce only 15% of the output that an average American would produce. But then the gray area here is the gap between the two countries, and you can see the huge gap between the two countries in 1950. But then what happened? Korea made substantial catch up over the last 70 years. You can see that the gap is narrowing. It's becoming smaller and smaller over time. And so the gap is narrowed to 40% in 2019. That is, now an average Korean produces $85,000 worth output in a year compared to $135,000 worth output in the United States. That is 62% of the output that an American would produce in a year. So that is the kind of catch up we are talking about in productivity. And now the question is that how did Korea achieve that? That's what we have on the right hand side of the chart. This is basically the growth rate of productivity of Korea, which is yellow bar lines, and growth rate of productivity in United States, which is the blue line. And you can see the gap in the productivity growth marked by the gray area. So Korea's productivity grew substantially during the 1960-1980 period. You can see that the sharp increase is almost a straight up in a vertical line. Average labor productivity growth was 5% during this period in South Korea. And the Korea also managed or maintained that 5% productivity growth rate until 2000s, from 1950 till 2000s. Actually, it's a huge, pretty long period of time. And this growth, as you can see, was far, far ahead of the United States, because United States productivity was about 2% and less than 2% during the entire period here. So that really helped South Korea to catch up faster with the United States. Indeed, in recent periods, as you can see here, since 2000s, there has been fall in the growth rate of productivity, but still Korea is much ahead of United States. That is still helping this country to continue catch up with the United States. So the point I wanted to make here is that a comparison of productivity growth over years, which is on the right-hand side chart, and with the peers, which is on the left-hand side chart, gives us a feeling of how well a country or industry or firm is doing in terms of productivity. Now the question is that, why was Korea able to climb up the productivity ladder so fast like this, and by which it could close the productivity gap with the United States? To understand that, recall what I said in the case of Rajit and myself comparisons, all those factors that might have helped Rajit to improve productivity. In Korea's case, there is a huge literature that really looks into why Korea was able to move up in the productivity ladder. There are several factors. I will just briefly tell you those. It was large investments in capital, physical capital, like machines and computers and buildings and transport equipments, all those kind of equipments. High quality capital, more efficient capital. Investment in human capital that substantially played a significant role in Korea's productivity surge. Higher education institutions, they invested heavily. Investment in infrastructure development, faster in innovation by imitating technologies and also innovating. Korea was much ahead of many other countries in terms of innovation, and all these played a substantial role in helping Korea to move up in the productivity ladder. But you can have a huge amount of literature on determinants of productivity here. Now, that, as I said earlier, I will be focusing mostly on macroeconomics, and I also most of the stories which I told you are also macroeconomic. And productivity also can be measured at the individual level, firm level, industry level, or aggregate national level. So this last one, the national productivity or the aggregate economy productivity, is more often considered in policy circles because it helps compare how countries are compared and also helps to evaluate the weaknesses of the economy. And also, more importantly, it is more helpful in devising macroeconomic policies. Now, let us take the example of Rajit and myself again. Suppose that in the entire economy, it is only myself and Rajit. So we constitute the economy, so that the aggregate economy is the sum of the output produced by Rajit and myself. Now we know that Rajit is super productive than me. And so therefore, the aggregate productivity of the economy in which only I and Rajit are there, it is the combined productivity of the two of us. What I am doing is, in fact, I am pulling down the aggregate productivity because Rajit's productivity is much higher than mine. So when we take the average of myself and Rajit, that will lower the aggregate productivity much below Rajit's productivity, because the average is going to be somewhere in between myself and Rajit. So what do we do to improve the aggregate productivity? Either I have to improve my productivity and climb up the ladder and to reach to Rajit's productivity so that the aggregate productivity will go up. But there is also another way to improve productivity of the aggregate economy. Suppose that I know that I am more productive in driving cars than doing this kind of assignment. So if I shift myself to drive a taxi and be more productive than spending my time on, doing this assignment. So if I shift myself to drive a taxi and become more productive, I can help the aggregate economy productivity to go up, because now my productivity will be higher than my productivity in the original case of doing that assignment. So now an average of my productivity in taxi, which is higher, and Rajit's productivity in doing that assignment, which is also higher, that creates a better world. This movement of me to this taxi driving job is what we call structural transformation in economics. I'm pretty sure you may have heard about Lewis theory, where Lewis says that you workers move from subsistence agriculture to industrial sector, and then later to services sector as we develop our economies, and then rose to stages of production, and also Kushnet's hypothesis, all those theoretical things. I'm not going to that. All these are related to this simple explanation I provided to you, that resources are moving from low productive to more higher productivity activities. So to bring to more real life example again, when workers move from agriculture to manufacturing, productivity grows faster because in general, productivity growth in the manufacturing sector is higher than in agricultural sector. So the two ways of improving aggregate productivity is that all firms or sectors of the economy improves their productivity, just like I was trying to improve my productivity. So productivity improvements within individual sectors. The second way is that resources move from low productivity to high productivity sectors. For instance, workers or investment moves away from low productivity level sectors to high productivity sectors. We call it static reallocation, because this is the standard structural transformation hypothesis. We are moving to sectors where productivity levels are high. The second one is that within that is that workers could also move from low growing sectors to fast growing sectors. And this is what we call dynamic reallocation. So this can also improve aggregate productivity growth. So we are moving to resources to fast growing sectors. Now, having said so much about productivity, the question then is that why do policymakers worry about productivity growth? As we said earlier, an economy can simply go by adding more and more inputs. So you keep on investing, you keep on employing more and more workers, and you exploit your natural resources and continue grow and grow. Why do we worry about productivity? There are several reasons, but I will highlight a few. As I said earlier, if you produce more output using more and more input, that imposes economic, social, and environmental costs on society. For instance, I will give you an example which is appealing to you. If we have to work more hours, we have to compromise on our leisure time, our family time. So it is an implicit cost for us, right? Because we have to compromise, we have to take the time from our family or from our leisure to spend more on working. So productivity is not about working hard. It is about working smart. So now, alternatively, if you can continue investing, you spend more and more money and you use more and more resources. So you grow by investing more and more capital. Then what happens? You are exploiting the scarce resources and you are depleting your resources. And also you are foregoing your current consumption for future investment. So all these things is coming up actually because you are either you are sparing your time or you are using your natural resources for more and more to produce more output. But what happens if you are focusing on productivity? Productivity growth provides the opportunity to increase output without increasing inputs. And therefore, it reduces the social cost and it also reduces the depletion of natural resources. It does not completely eradicate it because we need to grow on inputs. We need to create employment. We need to invest capital, but it reduces if you also, along with that, if you complement the input accumulation with productivity growth, that reduces the cost of, social cost of production and also the environmental depletion. So from a country's perspective, productivity growth, I already told you, it can be either productivity growth, aggregate productivity growth can be improved either by improving productivity growth within firms or by moving to more productive activities. So what happens is that productivity growth, when you have the aggregate economy productivity growth, that helps to produce more goods and services without using too many resources. That will improve efficiency. Actually, you can see that I have all the flow charts here. So it improves basically efficiency because you are using less inputs and producing more output. It increases competitiveness of firms and countries because you can produce at lower cost now. It improves the standard of living because now you have more products to consume and which are produced at using fewer resources, so they are less expensive. It helps improve wages because firms have produced more with less inputs, so they have more to reinvest, and they can also raise the wages. And they are also less expensive. Products are less expensive. And also it creates more income and demand, because now you have more creating more income. Some noise is coming, actually. I don't know where it is coming from. And it also creates further jobs and production, because as demand is increasing, it can create more jobs and production subsequently. I think somebody has to mute. There is a lot of noise coming.
Excuse me. Amal, please mute.
Thank you, Shidal.
Excuse me, Amal, please. Okay.
And of course, so mostly productivity growth is again with mostly positives, but of course there could be also negatives, because if we keep on continuing labor productivity growth, often there is a high trade-off between labor productivity and employment, because you will lose employment. But in most cases, that is a short-term phenomenon. If you look at the historical perspective globally, this is a short-term phenomenon, because in the long run, as productivity creates more incomes and jobs, it also creates more opportunities in another sectors of the economy. So in aggregate, it could trigger more job creation, but it may also kill jobs in some sectors, but it creates more jobs in other sectors. So that way, in the long run, it could create more job, and it's more beneficial to the society. So that is the reason why we care about productivity. Now, when I say this benefits of productivity, here is some real data on labor productivity measures. I have plotted the employment and output index here in these two charts for India and China, with 1951 as the base year for both countries. So 1951, I assume that the output and employment levels in both India and China were 100. And then I'm comparing how that has been changing over years. So the yellow shaded area is the employment index, and the gray shaded area is the output index. Actually, it is overlapping on the employment index, and the dark gray area above the employment area is basically productivity, labor productivity. So what you can see here is that on the left-hand chart, in China, output increased 185 times over the last 70 years. So from 100 to nearly 20,000 in China. So that is about 185 times increase in output in China, with 3 times increase in employment, from 100 to 329. So with 3 times increase in employment, China could increase its output 185 times. That means that China has improved its labor productivity massively over this period. India is not bad either, but far, far behind China. India's output expanded 30 times compared to China, so from 100 to 3,000, while its employment expanded little more than China by 3.5 times. That, of course, is that faster increase in employment is something which we can understand, because India has a higher unemployment rate compared to China. Even today, I think India's unemployment is anywhere between 8 and 10%, while China is 4%, less than 4%. But the fact is that China, even if you account for that, China has grown its productivity so rapidly over time. And I see a lot of questions are coming in, but I think I will take those questions at the end. Now I will go on. Maybe that is better. So, India has not been able to improve its productivity at the same pace as China has. Why that has happened, that has been the case, I will not go to that, but it's a bigger question. We can discuss it. There are a number of factors how China did it and why India was not able to do that. But I just wanted to focus on one thing, what it means for India versus China in terms of welfare. So in this chart, I have plotted per capita income in 2018 purchasing power parities. I'm assuming that purchasing power parity concept, it's basically comparing the same products in India and China. So it's there is no price effect, or there is no exchange rate effect or anything. So one bread on bread in India is compared with a bread in China, rather than the value of the bread or the price of the bread or anything. It's just simply the quantities of the products which we are comparing. So per capita income in India today is $7,200 in purchasing power parities, whereas in China it is $17,000. Now, in 1952, the first year in this chart, India's per capita income was $840 compared to just $220, as you can see in the chart in China. That would basically mean an average Indian was 4 times richer than an average Chinese in 1952. But what happened over time? Even in 1991, when India transitioned to a more liberal economy, the per capita income in both countries was about $1,600. The gap was nearly zero. But since then, China really took off. Its economy grew faster with faster labor productivity growth, as we have seen in the previous chart, driven largely by capital accumulation and total factor productivity and improved infrastructure, skill, and all those kind of things. But what happened is that led to the widening of income gap between the two countries. Right now, as we speak, the average Chinese citizen is 2.5 times richer than the average Indian citizen. So these are the kind of examples of how productivity statistics can help us compare across countries. Simple examples. Of course, there are more complicated and sophisticated examples. I'm not going to that. So these are some of the simple examples of how productivity can be compared. Now, let me see how I'm doing in terms of time. Okay. So now, in terms of, let me give you a recap of what we have been saying now, because I really want you to make sure that you have taken the main points from what I have discussed. So productivity is the ratio of output to input, and it tells you how much you produce per unit of input, and is indicative of efficiency in production and welfare. It is of high use in policy making, and it helps welfare gain, curb inflation, etc., etc. Two main measures of productivity of partial, for example, labor productivity and total factor productivity. And partial productivity can be achieved either by improving overall productivity or total factor productivity, or by increasing more and more input accumulation. And higher productivity in the aggregate economy can also be achieved by making workers work with more machines or shifting production upwards. And aggregate economic productivity can be improved either by improving productivity of all sectors or by shifting resources to more productivity sectors. So faster productivity growth has helped countries to improve their welfare in the past history. So that is what we have, the summary of what we have in terms of productivity. Now let me move into the second stage of my talk, which is about digital transformation. So your HOD, Dr. 𝘿𝙞𝙬𝙖, was already talking about the digital transformation, which we have been seeing, an inevitable change, which was accelerated after the COVID-19 pandemic. So let us first see what is digital transformation. To provide to understand the first that concept, first let me give you a brief context to this. I think again, Dr. 𝘿𝙤𝙬𝙖 has indicated earlier that we are in the fourth industrial revolution. First, look at the history of technology and the evolution of our production process over time. In the 17th century, we had steam engine and water power that helped mechanization of production using mechanical equipment, textile production, machine tools, chemicals, transportation, even the factory system itself evolved during this time. That was the first industrial revolution. And it was also during this period that we as a human society broke out of the Malthusian trap. I'm pretty sure you all heard about Malthusian trap, because I remember myself as a degree student, we always talk about Malthusian trap and the population, stuff like that. So until then, the population was growing so rapidly than the per capita income. And since the first industrial revolution, population and per capita income started simultaneously growing for the first time in the human history. Then comes the second industrial revolution, where we had electricity, iron and steel, maritime technologies, mass production, internal combustion engine, and that led to the revolution in automobiles, rubber industry, telecom, mass production, and all those kind of things. This was a period of largest economic growth in the world history, actually. Standard of living improved, prices of goods and services, because technology helped production, that declined rapidly. But at the same time, unemployment has gone up significantly because technologies replaced workers. We are going to see the same kind of things in the future also. But these inventions also led to the groundwork for the golden age of productivity, in the United States, also in the Western world, especially in the post-World War 1948-1973 periods, actually significant productivity improvement in the Western advanced economies. And then comes in the end of 1960s, we also saw the seeds of IT revolution coming up, with inventions like the database and personal computers taking a root. But that was still at a very low pace. The internet supplemented that phase of IT revolution in 1989. That was the third industrial revolution. So even though it started in the late 1960s, I would consider it as a revolution since 1980s and maybe even 1990s till 2000s. And then right now we are in the fourth industrial revolution, where we have moved away from simple internet and computer world to more sophisticated digital technologies. We still don't know, and we are still exploring it, how it is going to figure out. For example, we move to a cyber physical system, which they call CPS, which is a computer system in which a mechanism is controlled completely or monitored by computer-based algorithm rather than human beings. The Internet of Things, you hear all these catchwords: Internet of Things, cloud computing, 3D printing, artificial intelligence, blockchain, machine learning, a kind of number of things, right? All these are they're taking off faster at a very faster pace at the moment. We all, as we sit here, Industry Revolution 1 and 2, we only heard about it. While Industry 3, part of it we have experienced, of course, already, because many of you have lived through 90s and 2000s. And this fourth Industry Revolution, which is something that we are now delving into. And that is what we are now going to explore, what it is going to be and how it is going to impact productivity. Now, I'm going to focus on part of the Industrial Revolution 3 and part of Industrial Revolution 4. When I say part, because I take the first phase of digital economy as the old digital economy, which is the second phase of Industrial Revolution 3, which is 1980s till 2000s, which was a revolution I call old digital economy. This is in the 1980s. In the old digital economy, we had the digitization driven by the rise of personal computers and the internet as the key drivers of greater business efficiency, productivity, and things like that. And that created a lot of access for individuals and to organizations to digitization at the beginning of 1980s and more prominently in the 1990s. And it was also the beginning of e-commerce and stuff like that. And then I have a new digital economy, which I see started since mid-2000s. In this digitization was driven by combination of mobile technology, mobile phones, smartphones, everybody has it now. Also the ubiquitous access to the internet, and the shift towards more storage, analysis, development of new applications in the cloud, blockchain, 3D printing, machine learning, robotics, artificial intelligence, as all sort of things. So these are the two divisions I will be looking into while making my comparisons and analysis of the global economy in the subsequent slides. So the old digital economy, which is before the mid-2000s, and the new digital economy is after the mid-2000s. So there is a huge shift in the two economies. Now, let us also make it clear that digital technologies per se, or the digitization per se, is not digital transformation. So digital technologies is all those things which I told you earlier, all the internet, mobile, computers, cloud, and all those kind of things. But what is digital transformation? Digital transformation is the use of these technologies and several platforms to connect businesses, firms, organizations, individuals, governments, even assets, production processes, and so on, in a very novel and innovative ways. So those technologies can help you to develop new types of products, new types of production processes, also to create new markets and new business models for firms, new way of administration in the governments, and so on. It also helps to produce products that cater better needs of consumers. For example, many healthcare products in the Western European countries are catering to old age people, completely based on digital technologies are completely available now. So taking all this into account, this digital transformation helps to improve productivity, because you remember all those things which I told you earlier. What are the factors that can improve productivity? That this is an important factor that can contribute to all of them. For instance, again, technologies of teleconferencing has been there for a while, right? Because I have been, because earlier one of your friends was saying about me, well, while I was working as a senior economist at the conference board, I was using this kind of digital conferencing technologies for last 6 years. But since COVID-19, we have been embracing it for more rapidly, and that has been absorbed massively, transforming societies, the way in which businesses are working, the way in which your education is working, the way in which governments are administering, and so on. So this is what is digital transformation. So the embracing these technologies, that will lead to digital transformation. So now that brings me to the question of how digital technologies affect productivity of an economy. So I'm not going to talk about how digital transformation affect productivity within firms. That's a bigger question, but I'm going to talk about how digital transformation is going to influence productivity in an economy. There are several channels through which digital technologies can help productivity growth in an economy. I will focus on the direct and indirect channels. First, the direct channel. Since digital producing technology sectors, because these technologies are produced by a sector, right? Because computer is produced by a sector or a firm, or cloud computing is produced by a firm, artificial intelligence is innovated and produced by a firm, and so on. So these sectors which are producing these technologies are improving, and they are inventing new products and services faster than ever. So these sectors will see an acceleration in productivity growth. So that is the first direct channel, which we call a production effect. Digital producing sectors are improving their productivity. Second is that when digital using sectors invest heavily in ICT equipment like computers, or buying a cloud service, or softwares and things like that, their labor productivity improves. Again, remember I told you, when you have high quality capital, that can improve your labor productivity. So now workers are working with better machines, so their productivity improves. So this is an old digital economy, because you are investing in ICT machines and computers and internet and so on. That helps you to improve productivity. The third is a service effect. Because again, in sectors which are using ICT, new digital technologies, like buying a cloud computing services or buying a kind of teleconferencing services and so on, all these services are also going to improve the way in which workers are working, and their productivity will improve. So this is a new digital economy effect, because more and more shift to more and more digital services will also improve productivity. Finally, there is an improved spillover effect. And again, I'm assuming that you know what is spillover. Spillover is just like, okay, if I have a garden in my house, and there is a person in the upstairs of my house living for rent, and he can enjoy my garden because he is not spending anything for that, because I am taking care of my garden. So he's getting a spillover effect. Just like that, there is a improved spillover effect, because when you organize your production with better quality equipment and services, and your coordination, communication, and organization becomes more efficient, which can lead to improved overall productivity within firms which are using digital technologies, and also because of a lot of networks effect. So there will be a lot of productivity effect. So that is more like indirect effect. So you have two effects: direct impact and indirect impact. The direct impact is production, investment, and service effect, and finally the indirect impact is productivity effect. So now let us look into the first digital economy. Here I have the prices of ICT goods. By ICT goods, what I mean is that computers, telecom equipment, and software. This is all digital economy stuff. Prices of ICT goods in the United States compared with the general consumer prices in the United States. I take United States because most of the prices in the ICT goods are determined by United States, because that they are the leading producers of computers and so on. So what you can see is that the prices of ICT goods have declined so rapidly since 1990. So in the left-hand side of the chart, you have the prices of computers, communication equipment, software, and I divide them into different time periods. The blue one is 1990-2000. The gray one is 2000 to 2010, and the yellow one is 2010 to 2019. So the prices of ICT goods have declined so rapidly since 1990. That was possible simply because of the substantial increases in the productivity in the ICT producing sector. Because ICT producing sector was improving rapidly in their technology in developing these products, and because of that, they could sell those products cheaper and cheaper in the market. So this is the production effect which we were saying earlier. The price decline was much rapid in the 1990-2000 period for computers, whereas it was more comparable in the 1990-2010 and 1990-2000 period for communication equipment and software. But in all the cases, the fall in the prices has eased since 2010. This is also indicative of the saturation of the ICT equipment, innovation, and the shift towards more new digital services or the new digital economy. So we are already, even in the production side, we are moving away from digital, old digital economy to new digital economy. So to put this decline in prices in perspective, you can also look at the consumer prices, which is also, I have on the right hand side the annual changes in the prices, and on the left hand side the averages. You can see that the consumer prices have been, general consumer prices have been continuously declining over time. So compared to that, you can really see that the prices have been declining in the IT sector. So what happened? This rapid price decline in the ICT sector also helped many firms to adopt these technologies and use their in their production. For example, in 1995, when I was a degree student, there was almost nobody had a computer access. Even when I was doing a master's in John Mathai Center, there was only one computer in the whole institute because it was not affordable to us. But over time, since 1990, the price of the computers have declined so rapidly, which made it possible for many poorer countries, almost all firms in the world, to invest more and more in ICT and embrace its impact on productivity. So this is the investment effect I was talking about. And then there is a productivity effect, which I don't have here because it is more difficult to measure here. So I'm not going to talk about it. But that is a spillover effect, which you can say. And you can see that spillover effect in this chart. In this chart, which plots the labor productivity growth on the y-axis against the ICT investment to GDP ratio on the x-axis. And you can clearly see a very significant positive relationship. Countries that invested heavily in ICT investments grew much faster in productivity in general. So that is a kind of relationship which we see. I mean, there are some outliers, but they do not affect actually the relationship. So clearly, the spillover effect on productivity from ICT has been also strong and positive. And as I said, I also promised to talk about a little bit about India. This picture is about India. This is a project which I have been working on from the Reserve Bank of India, CLUMS project, which is called. Based on that, we have developed this ICT investment series. So basically, you remember that framework I showed you, how you can decompose the growth of output into labor productivity and then labor productivity into different components. So capital, deepening, labor quality, and total factor productivity. And capital productivity is now divided into ICT capital and non-ICT capital here in this chart. So we all know that India excels in the export of software services, and we are very good IT people and so on. But its own use of ICT investment or the old digital economy in the production process is quite limited. The gray bar here is the ICT investment contribution to productivity growth in India. That is relatively smaller compared to non-ICT capital, as you can see. And also the most important thing is that it also have remained somewhat stagnant over time. You can see that the quantity magnitude of the gray bar is quite the same in both periods, despite the fact that in the second period, we have seen huge productivity improvement in India. So that is primarily because of our manufacturing sector in India is still not embracing the technology sufficiently, partly due to financial constraint and partly due to a lot of informal presence in the manufacturing sector. I will not go to that, but one thing I wanted to say is that to put this again into perspective, in the old digital economy, advanced economies like United States, Japan, and Korea, they were having 30 to 35% of their productivity growth coming from investment in ICT. So that tells you how how behind we are in India in terms of embracing ICT, even in the old digital economy, and translating that into productivity. So now let me move a little bit faster because of the time. I will move on to the new digital economy. So this chart basically shows you, I don't have that symbol, all the details here, but basically what it tells you is that in the advanced economies, many countries have moved away from investing in ICT investment, just like that is like computers and softwares and so on, which we have seen in the 1980s till 2005 period, especially in the 1995-2005 period. We have seen a lot of investment happening in advanced economies in ICT goods and products, actually, like computers and so on. But now, since 2005 onwards, you do not see that actually. They are not investing, buying in computers. They are not investing in buying softwares and communication equipment and so on. But now they are increasingly shifting to services, buying cloud computing, buying digital services and so on. This is a kind of indication of these advanced economies are already moving towards more new digital economy, and that comes up with a lot of measurement challenges, how we are going to measure it. But again, I'm not going to do that. But I'm going to show you how that is going to figure out to productivity in the advanced economies. So how that is reflecting in productivity. So this chart basically is the labor productivity growth. The total of this chart, the numbers at the top, is labor productivity growth in the 3 regions, Euro area. That means Europe, basically, United States and the United Kingdom, 3 advanced economies, advanced regions. And I'm dividing that productivity, aggregate economy productivity growth into 3 different components. The first is the productivity growth that is coming from extensive users of digital technologies, which is the green bar here. And then the digital producing sectors, that just like producers of computers, digital services, cloud computing services, service providers, 3D printers, and so on, all those services. And then the least digital intensive sectors, that is sectors which are not using digital technologies much in their production process. So this is, again, I have divided into old digital economy, which is 1996-2006, and the new digital economy, which is 2007-2008. What you see here is that digital intensive using sectors, which is the green bars here, contributed almost 60% of productivity growth in the UK, half of the productivity in the United States, and 40% of the Euro area productivity in the 1990s. So that is in the first digital economy period, 50 to 60% of the productivity growth in the advanced economies came from digital intensive sectors, like the producing sector or the using sector. The digital producing sector contributed more than 1/5 of the UK productivity and 1/3 of productivity in the United States. So clearly, the direct impact or the production effect and the indirect impact or the usage effect of digital technologies in the old digital economy on labor productivity was substantial in the advanced economies. Now look at the second period, 2007-2008 period. This is the transformation to the new digital economy. Productivity growth fell in almost all sectors. This is also a period where we had the financial crisis, so that has figured out here significantly. But even if you discount for the financial period, the productivity growth has fallen substantially. But what you see is that it fell more rapidly in non-digital sectors. It was even negative in the non-digital sector. In the UK, you can see that in the blue bar. So the productivity has declined everywhere, but the decline was more rapid in the non-digital sectors, while the digital sectors decline was not so substantial compared to the non-digital sectors. But still, there is a paradox. The paradox is that although we say that there has been a shift in the new digital technologies since 2000s, firms are embracing digital technologies, the digital using sectors do not show a faster productivity decline and so on, but you still see that digital using sectors do not show a faster productivity growth in this period compared to the previous period. The productivity growth has declined in their sector as well. The digital producing sectors in the US, for instance, do even better than the digital using sectors here, actually, because digital using sectors are still doing worse actually there. This is also true with Europe and Euro area. So why is that? Does that mean that all our assumptions of digital transformation will drive productivity? It will have direct and indirect effect on productivity growth. All those assumptions are wrong. Actually, I would say no. I would say no, primarily because I will tell you this chart in a minute, but before that, let me give you a little bit of introduction to that. In 1987, Robert Solow, the famous economist, said that we see computers everywhere except in the productivity statistics. That became known as the Solow paradox in the literature. What happened is that even though we were investing heavily in computers, the productivity effect was not seeing in the statistics. But as I have shown you earlier, in the 90s, we have really seen the productivity impact coming in the old digital economy. That basically says that there is a kind of time lag in the productivity effect of digital transformation. And we are expecting a similar time lag in the case of the new digital transformation as well. Now, to substantiate that point, you see this picture, where on the left-hand side, I have the multi-factor productivity growth rate in the digital intensive industries, that is, sectors which are producing and using digital technologies, and digital use non-digital sectors, which is on the right-hand side. You can clearly see that the productivity growth is higher in the digital intensive sectors. But what you can also see is that on the left-hand side, where you can see that 95% of the firms within the digital using sector is still far behind of 5% of frontier firms. So there is a kind of superstar firms, they are really driving the growth, while there are a lot of firms that are really lagging behind. That brings me to the next slide, where I make a conclusion that we know that everybody is touched by the technology. We are all using it, but it is still not absorbed enough by firms in their production process. There are a few firms and governments which are absorbing it faster, while there are many firms which are lagging behind. That is the reason why we do not see this happening in the aggregate economy. It is still a difficult technology for firms to embrace because this involves a lot of cost, and the nature of the technology is changing day by day. So companies and firms are reluctant to embrace the technology. But perhaps it is also the first technology in the whole history of 1 to 4 technological revolution, a technology that is embraced by consumers first and producers still in the process, because we all use this technology, while companies and firms are still embracing gradually. So we are in a kind of installation phase of this technology. And during this installation phase, we will see a lot of disruptions, lot of job losses, and also concentrated growth in a few companies and few firms that will not be seen in the aggregate economy. And that can even lead to a kind of crisis in the global economy and in these many individual economies, because we have seen this in the case of previous technologies. But once that installation phase is over, and when we enter into deployment phase, we will see more creative construction of these activities, and we will see the fruits of productivity coming in, just like we have seen the old digital economy figuring out its productivity in the 1990s. So with that, actually, I'm coming to the close of my presentation. So we definitely will see the productivity thing. But what happened is that something really happened in 2009, in the end of last year and the beginning of this year, that really accelerated this pace of technological change. With all this background, COVID-19 came because these things were already happening, and COVID-19 came. That has really accelerated the pace of digital technologies globally. In particular, teleconferencing has increased massively, and people who were more reluctant to use the technology before are increasingly moving towards it. And along with that, there is a number of other technologies which are shaping up now, which will, I think, will take off more rapidly in the coming years. These include telemedicine, blockchain, mechanical learning, and so on. Did I lose you? Can something really happen? Can someone?
No. We can.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you, sister.
And you can still see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because something happened on my screen here. I'm sorry. So I just wanted to see all these kind of technologies are happening, but I just wanted to show you this robot at the left-hand corner. Her name is.
Sister, 1 minute. We haven't seen your screen now. Only the profile picture is visible.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So let me share my screen again. I don't know what happened.
Please.
Do you see my screen now?
No. Yeah.
Still not?
Yeah. Now we can see that. Yeah.
Excellent. So you see this little robot at the left-hand corner. Her name is Zora. She was a special guest in our economics department opening in September 2016. Zora takes care of elderly people in residential care centers in the Netherlands. She is taking care of them. And she is also helping young kids with autism in many schools in the Netherlands. So that clearly tells you how fast artificial intelligence is growing and the rate of expansion that is happening. All this will happen, and this is already happening, and I think it is going to happen more rapidly in the coming decade, and it is going to touch all our lives. Nobody will be spared actually in this space. So finally, that comes me to bring me to my final slide here. Actually, I just wanted to give you a recap. The main takeaways from the past second phase of my slide was that we are in the second wave of digital age, and the increased use of digital technologies can enhance productivity through production, investment, service, and spillover effects. However, we do not see any evidence of digital transformation influencing productivity at an aggregate level yet. But we have seen that happening in the first digital age. And this is because we are still in the installation phase of this technology. And I believe COVID-19 has accelerated the pace of that technology embracement significantly. And also, I have argued in a recent blog that since 2001, global manufacturing trade and global manufacturing fragmentation and globalization has been on a retreat. It has been declining. And I think that will continue. Manufacturing globalization and globalization in general will decline in general because of a number of factors. But there is something else which will happen, the service globalization, because digital technologies is going to help a doctor in India do a surgery in the Netherlands. That is going to happen. And that will happen more rapidly because of the COVID-19 pandemic, because now people's aversion to use these technologies has changed, and that will accelerate more enormously. The only thing we need is skill complementarities. And therefore, early advantage for these technologies will go to countries, organizations, firms, and governments that embrace this technology and also invest heavily in education, human capital, and equipping their population to embrace this technology. There is no doubt that this technology is going to help all of us in many ways, and those who embrace it and get their populations equipped will be leading, and the others will lag behind. It will indeed lead to a lot of disruptions, job losses, and displacement. There is no doubt about it. And that really makes the role of governments in ensuring social safety net and improving skills and education even more important in the coming decade. Thank you very much. And it is time for your question now. And thank you once again for listening to me. And I think my end of this talk also resonates with what I have seen in the survey, that most of you are also seeing that the biggest change we will see in the global economy is that digitization of societies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abdul sir, for giving your insights. The session was so easy and interesting, and it will help us a lot. So now we have got some questions on our chat box and we'll be reading it out on their behalf.
Okay.
So shall we move on?
Yes, you can.
Okay, so thank you. So the first question was asked by Godwin SK. Using neoclassical logic, private sector would have had a higher TFP. What's the empirical evidence on this? Any examples of public sector dominated segments showing better TFP than private sector?
That's a fantastic question, actually, very beautiful question, I would say. When we talk about total factor productivity, and first of all, productivity in the public sector, what it means is a huge question. Because public sector, when we say public sector, in most countries, it is mostly in the service sector, and wage increases in the service sector are, and the government sector are sometimes, often much bigger than private sector, and that reflects in their output. So the measurement of output itself is difficult. Now, coming to the question of whether we see evidence of private sector productivity improving, yes, we do see. We do see a lot of evidence on private sector productivity is increasing rapidly in many advanced economies. But let me also give you a reference. Recently, I have written a paper along with some colleagues in Delhi on productivity growth in India in Jawaharlal Nehru's period versus the post-liberalization period, in which what we see is that productivity growth in the pre-1990 period was much faster in the non-market services, which is primarily government services and so on. And then you see a significant shift in the 1990s where total factor productivity growth improves in the market economy or the private sector economy. So there is clear evidence on how private sector total factor productivity has been growing faster than government sector productivity growth globally, and also in the case of India. I hope that answers that question.
Thank you, sir. And the next question was also asked by Godwin, sir. What has been the empirical evidence on labor productivity in non-unionized service unionized labor?
I don't have a clear example answer to that question, but I can speculate a few things. Productivity growth, as I said, the labor productivity growth in the United States have been much faster than European Union countries. And European Union countries are countries where we have more socialistic structure of the economy. It's more like somewhere in between capitalistic and socialistic structure, while the United States is more like it's not perfect capitalism, but it's more like much more capitalistic societies where labor unions have lost their power. And I have myself seen some of my colleagues in the United States were being fired overnight, which were a surprise to me. For example, in Europe, we cannot do that. So that kind of flexibility they have in the labor market, and then that really have perhaps that is contributing a lot to their productivity growth. But I personally, I'm not a big recommender or supporter of that kind of approach, because you can compromise on some productivity growth by improving your social safety net. So labor unions and the loss of their bargaining power has done two things. They have increased the productivity growth so rapidly, and they also have reduced the power of labor productivity into translating into wages. And that has not happened substantially in countries like France or Germany, but it has happened significantly in the United States. And because ideally, if your labor productivity is growing faster, then your wages should also be growing. That is not only in the neoclassical literature, but also in people like Shapiro and Stiglitz, who have been developing this efficiency wage theory and so on. They have also argued the wages and the productivity will go hand in hand. But that has not been happening in the United States, especially since the 1970s, where productivity growth has been going so rapidly, while wages has been growing very slowly. And that is primarily because of the increased flexibility of a labor market and the decline in the union's bargaining power. So that's a very good question. Again, the point is that where the unions have lost their bargaining power, the productivity growth has improved actually. And that is also the reason why many organizations, many people have been arguing in India to increase the flexibility in the labor market. But in my perspective on that is that indeed we have to improve the flexibility in the labor market, but that has to come with significant government intervention in terms of ensuring safety net. For example, if I lose my job in Europe, I will be protected by the government. I will be getting 70% of my last salary, which I have been drawing from my work. So that is the kind of, because they will be taking it from my salary as I work, but then they will ensure that my safety is being guaranteed even when I lose my job. So that kind of government intervention is essential in such kind of situation, but that does not mean that we should compromise on productivity growth.
Thank you, sir. The next question was asked by Anupama. In your perspective, what would be the main reason of high unemployment rate all over the world before taking the case of COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, that is a very difficult question, Anupama. There are a number of factors that has been playing a role in rising unemployment. But again, I think I completely do not agree with you that globally unemployment has been extremely high in the pre-pandemic period already, because many European countries have been seeing unemployment falling, and I see a lot of discussion in European countries about lack of workers in the next decade rather than unemployment, because they are already talking about aging population and increasing working retirement age and so on here in many advanced economies. So unemployment has been a bigger problem for countries like India, Brazil, for example, while many advanced European economies, that has not been a substantially big problem in the pre-pandemic period. But having said that, we have been seeing a decline both in productivity and also economic activities in general before the pandemic. There has been a number of factors playing out there, both on the demand side as well as on the supply side. Because we had a severe financial crisis in 2008. And after that 2008 financial crisis, we had a big recovery. And then ever since then, we have been seeing a slowing growth, primarily because China was the main driver of economic growth globally in the pre-2008 financial crisis. And China is losing its steam for a number of reasons. Of course, there is an increasing anti-globalization sentiments in the Western world that is triggering a lot of trade disruptions and tensions between between China and the West. And China is also transforming itself within itself, because it is transforming from a export-oriented, investment-oriented economy to more consumption-oriented, service-oriented economy, which is typically associated with lower economic growth. Another factor is India. I'm not going to discuss about India now a lot, because I can talk about another 2 hours for India's economic growth decline. But the thing is that we have been talking a lot about India's investment climate is improving, blah, 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 all these things. But actually, in reality, that is not happening in India. India's investment rate has been falling since 2006, steadily falling. Investment rate means investment to GDP ratio. And that has been falling, especially in the government investment in India has been falling so rapidly that is not creating jobs, and that is not creating the infrastructure or the environment in which private investment can stimulate. India had a lot of policies. Of course, India has the largest environmental policies in the world, I have read somewhere, but we are very poor in implementing. So India has 3 deficits actually, when I always say current account deficit, fiscal deficit, and implementation deficit. We create a lot of policies, but we do not implement them properly. So all these factors have been playing a substantial role, and demand has been changing. The structure of demand has been changing because many advanced economies and also countries like in some of the Asian economies like Singapore has been seeing a significant old age population, and they are not buying products and services the same way as young people are buying. So that is already affecting the demand for products and services and also the nature of demand for products and services. These are all changing. So a lot of factors are changing that is contributing to the general decline in the economic activity globally. And the economic activity decline in the general economic activity can also lead to fall in employment potentially. Thank you very much. And Shidal, any other questions? Let's go on.
Thank you, sir. The next question is asked by Krishnan. Whether the increase in unemployment rate in the economy will affect the aggregate productivity of the country.
Yeah, so your question is whether the increase in the employment, right? Not unemployment. Increase in the employment affect the aggregate productivity. That is the question, right?
Unemployment rate, sir.
Increase in the unemployment. Okay, whether the increase in the unemployment will affect aggregate productivity. The answer is yes, and yes, actually, because increase in unemployment basically would mean that you are creating less jobs, and so that can have two ways of influence on productivity. The first is that it can have a demand side effect, because when you have more and more unemployment in the economy, the demand or the incomes and the demand will be also falling. So that could affect the demand side of production, because you are not there is no substantial demand increasing in the economy. That can influence output generation, and that can further trigger productivity on the one hand. On the other hand, there can be also an offsetting effect, because if you are not increasing your employment, if your employment growth is not increasing, and if your output is continuously increasing, that can have technically lead to a marginal improvement in productivity. So the net effect on the aggregate productivity really depends upon whether the demand side effect or the supply side effect dominates. So I cannot tell you what is the net effect is going to be, and that could be different for every country or every industry, depending upon which factor is dominating, whether the supply side factor is dominating or the demand side factor is dominating in that equation.
Sir, we have some few more questions.
Yes, I am here.
So
we can go on if we have time, of course.
Okay, sir. Okay. Next question was asked by Farbin. Can you comment whether India is following a productivity growth compared to other countries?
Actually,
okay.
Yeah. So the question is, can you compare India compared to another country? Of course, we compare India with a lot of other countries, definitely. And I think I have myself shown you a chart earlier, if you remember, how India has been doing in terms of productivity growth compared to China. India has been doing pretty okay in terms of productivity growth since 1990s, especially since 2000s. But the thing is that has been concentrated in a few sectors, especially in the market services, like especially in the computer related services, business services, telecommunication services, and financial services. While productivity growth in the manufacturing sector in India has been very relatively poor compared to many other countries. So India has been excelling in productivity in the service sector. There is no doubt about it. But when you compare with other countries, there is no point in comparing India with United States. That is primarily because, as I said earlier, India has a significant catch-up potential, because India's productivity level compared to United States is like 14%. That means an average Indian produce 14% of output that an average American would produce in a year. So that basically means that we have 85% of productivity gap with the United States. So we need to grow faster, and we are growing faster than the United States. And the United States is not growing faster because it has already advanced a lot in technology. So any productivity growth which United States would make is by innovating. But while for India, innovation and technology is already there, we just need to absorb it, and we need to develop our infrastructure and environment, and then by which we can grow productivity. So there is no comparison. So comparison is more meaningful if you make a comparison of India with China, BRIC countries like Brazil, Russia, China, Indonesia, those kind of countries. And when you compare with these countries, India is definitely doing better than countries like Brazil, for example. But while it is not great compared to China, it is also comparable with Indonesia or Malaysia, those kind of countries. So there is a comparison, of course, and India is doing better. But again, the question is that whether we are doing enough or not. And that is a debatable question. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next question was asked by Thanya. How economic crisis and pandemics affect productivity?
Yeah, I think I have. This is a question which, of course, I have to speculate on the second question, the pandemic. But on the economic crisis, financial crisis in 2008, that has significantly influenced labor productivity and total factor productivity growth globally. Significant influence, but that was a very temporary influence because we recovered from that. But the fact is that global productivity growth has been falling even before the global financial crisis, and it has been continuously falling. There is a number of factors, as I said earlier, the demand shift and also the disruptions that is coming from the technological shift which we are making, because every technological shift is coming with a kind of disruptions into the productivity and technology economy. So that is happening. But the financial crisis productivity growth has negative in many countries like in United States, and also I think United States it was close to zero, while in countries like in European countries it was even negative. So there was significant negative effect. Now about the pandemic effect, it's difficult to say, but I think pandemic also definitely has influenced productivity, definitely in Europe, because Europe unemployment has not significantly increased after the pandemic, but the production has stalled. So that basically means that you still have the same amount of workers while you are producing less. That will definitely lower your productivity growth. In the United States, on the other hand, they have fired a lot of workers after the pandemic because there is no social safety net or anything. So that may have helped them to survive productivity growth. I don't know. I still have not seen any data coming in. So, but overall, globally speaking, the productivity growth might have affected substantially. But again, that we will recover if depending upon how long the crisis is going to sustain. But if the crisis sustains longer, of course, the impact on productivity will be larger and long lasting. If the pandemic does not sustain longer, we may recover from it. But again, it is going to be a kind of, we say, a K-shaped recovery in productivity and growth. When I say K-shaped, because there are three different types of recovery. One is a V-shaped recovery, that basically means that we go down significantly and then we come up immediately. A U-shaped recovery is like we go down significantly, but then we stay there at the lower part for some time, and then we come back gradually. That both those are very unlikely, both in productivity and growth after the pandemic. But what is more likely is a K-shaped recovery, which is more like some segments of the economy and some geographies or some economies will improve better. For example, sectors like hotels and restaurants, entertainment industry, those kind of industries where people have to go physically, they are going to suffer more compared to sectors which doesn't have to, which can easily recover those kind of things. So some sectors may recover faster, while some sectors may even be affected significantly permanently. For example, in a recent survey about a number of chief executives of companies in Europe and Asia and United States, shows that companies are now considering stopping business travels altogether, because they say that we are realizing that this is not anymore needed because we are gaining productivity by teleconferencing. So why do we need to spend a lot of money on making people to travel around the world? So that is going to have a significant influence on airline industry. That is going to have a significant influence on hospitality industry. So that is going to have significant influence on tourism industry. So these industries may take longer to recover in productivity and growth, while some other sectors may recover faster. So it is a kind of K-shaped recovery that we may find. But again, when it is going to happen, I think I can't predict it because we still don't know. We still don't have a virus vaccine. We still don't know how it is going to figure out. For example, in the Netherlands, we are seeing a second phase of the pandemic, and they have introduced more regulations here. And this is happening in many European countries also. So that's something which I don't have a complete answer, but I think I would speculate there will be a lot of effect on productivity and we will recover it. But again, that recovery is going to be like more mushroom type recovery here and there rather than more like a yeast kind of recovery, which we will see everywhere a recovery is going to see.
Okay, sir. The next question was asked by Irene Mariam Mani from Union Christian College, Alua. In developing country like India, is artificial intelligence a curse or a blessing?
I think the answer is going to be very, controversial if I make anything if I say anything over here. I think it really depends upon the choices you make, where you want to apply it, where you don't want to apply it. I think the biggest challenge for India, the biggest question for India is, do we want to create more quality jobs for Indians, especially for people like you who are coming out of the labor, educated people who are coming out of the schools and colleges and to the labor market, or do we want to create the typical kind of poor quality, dirty works for Indian people? So if you make that choice, then only you can make decisions on this. So it really depends. So I would not recommend that you replace all the jobs by automation and so on, because we have not reached there. But there are certain segments. For example, we have a lot of people who works in the manholes in India on cleaning, stuff like that. So these people are suffering their lifetime. And of course, these people, there are a number of people who may displace their job when you introduce technology to that. But at the same time, your objective should be that we should not be creating a next generation of people who are working in those sectors. You cannot do this simply by replacing workers by machines. You also have to invest in people along with it. That is why I always talk about complementarities. You have to equip your people. So the biggest problem for India is that our access to education, our quality of education. When I say access to education, we have substantial hindrance to our education system. When we sit in Kerala, we think, okay, the education is free, education, we are fine. But that is not the case if you go out of Kerala. Even if when you go out of the northern part of India, there are significant hurdles for people to get into the education system. And an auto driver's son or daughter becomes an auto driver always. So that is the kind of situation. So that is the reason why we celebrate when an Adivasi girl gets into an IPS or IAS, we celebrate it. Why do we celebrate it? Right? Because we, in the Netherlands, we don't celebrate when if a taxi driver's son or daughter becomes the minister or becomes an IT expert or anything. We do not celebrate it because everybody has the equal opportunity. And in India, we do not have it. And that is why we have to celebrate it. Right? So our problem is that it's not only the quality and the quantity of education, but the accessibility to education. We are discriminating people based on gender, based on their caste, based on religion, and all those kind of things. This is controversial, I know, but this is a reality. There was an EPW paper recently, very recently in 2020. If I remember correctly, the author is Thorat, for example, and they are really showing how caste discrimination has been practiced in the northern part of India. 40% of the population still practice some sort of caste discrimination, untouchability, not just caste discrimination. So all these factors are playing out significantly. So there is no straightforward answer to it. It is both curse and as well as blessings for India, but it really depends upon the choice which you make. And so every curse can be made into a choice and made into a blessing, provided you make the appropriate and right choices in your decisions.
Thank you, sir. So the next question was asked by Priya, and it's a similar question. Will artificial intelligence create more employment or unemployment in the case of India?
Yeah, I think that is the question which is related to what the previous question is. See, first of all, let me tell you one thing. What do you think? What do you all think about when we were introducing computers in the 1990s in India? Rajiv Gandhi was opening up to our market to computers. everybody, a lot of people, including myself, because I was also part of some student politics at that time. We were opposing it. I mean, I remember my father, for example, saying, "Oh, he was worrying about the farmer who was doing, the manual work in our garden will lose his job. With the computers will come and take over the jobs." What happened over time? Do you really think that the computers have removed all the jobs? Actually, if you look at the studies conducted in the United States, in Europe, you do not see that has happened. Of course, computers have killed jobs. They have abolished clerical jobs. A lot of other jobs they have removed. A lot of semi-skilled and lower skilled jobs have been lost. But it also created a lot of jobs, a substantially large number of jobs. So it's a kind of restructuring of jobs. So from the aggregate economy perspective, computers did not kill jobs. But when you look at the different segments of the economy, it really killed jobs. That is not good, of course. But that is why I'm consistently saying that we have to equip our people first before embracing anything. So if your people are ready to and flexible to move along with other kind of jobs, with the new generation jobs, we will be fine. If that is not the case, I think automation, computerization, and new digital technologies will kill jobs in India. Definitely, there is no doubt about it. And the question is that, are we ready for that? I think not. We are not ready for that in India. But the sad part is that we are also not moving in that direction in India. We still need to go far, far more, and we are not in the right direction. So that is the biggest challenge for India, I would say.
Okay, sir. The next question is asked by Priya Nair. Do you think there is a need to bring change in the education system in our country to increase production, like giving more focus on vocational education and shifting the focus from going for traditional job path and introducing entrepreneurship as a subject in the higher school level?
I think this is a question. I do not have an answer to that. But I think this is a question which they're asking even in Europe and the United States and everywhere actually, because both system has its own deficiencies and positives. For example, in Europe, in the Netherlands, my son, he goes to the high schools now. Actually, they decide in which stream the student goes based on the level at the age of 11. That really is also, sometimes people criticize it, because whether you should be going to the vocational stream or whether you should be going to the university academic stream at that age is, because I know myself, as I teach students, I get a lot of students who have been selected for university stream are not good. But there are some students who came out of the vocational stream because they realized that their stream is better in the academic. They are doing better. So it's all difficult choices, right? But in general, it is a good thing to introduce vocational training in the schools. But I also think that we should continue and we should have more and more social sciences along with it, because we should not allow technology to drive our life completely. Technology is, of course, because we also have another part of life, right? And as I said earlier, all these technologies, what they're going to do is that they're going to reduce the requirement of time which you need at your workplace, because you don't need to work a lot, because there is a lot of machines, a lot of technology that will aid you, and your working time can be less. You don't have to work 8 hours in the future. So you may be working 6 hours. So you are getting more time for socialization and so on. So your social consciousness is very important. And therefore, I think social studies and history and all those subjects are very important, along with all those kind of trainings, vocational training, technical schooling, and all those things. So I think it's a combination of the two. We need all of them, but I think it is important to include all the vocational type of schooling in the Indian syllabus as well. Yeah, I'm not an expert in education, but this is what I would think.
Thank you, sir. The next question was asked by Economics Department Union Christian College, Alva. These days, we are more into comparing Indian economy with Chinese economy. We are always highlighting Chinese economy. As post-Keynesian says, every event and every situation and each country is unique. We have our uniqueness. We are more accommodative and people are more happy compared to Chinese. Should we take that into account? In that sense, we are better. What's your opinion, sir?
Excellent question, I think. actually, my perspective on this, and I have argued it in many places actually. India is making a very big mistake by looking at China. I mean, I made a comparison basically to show you the productivity, how productivity can be compared. But basically, India is making a big mistake by saying that we should step into the shoe, which China is leaving behind. Actually, our leg does not fit into that shoe. That is what I believe always. What is the shoe China is leaving behind? The factory. Actually, I also had that question in my survey. The shoe which China is leaving behind is the global factory. And then now let us look at what China did and how China achieved it. Since 2001 till 2010 onwards, during that period, what you can see is that China has been focusing on lower segment of the global value chain. What I mean is that, let me give you an example. When Apple, of course, you all know Apple. Apple is a big giant in mobile phone technology. When Apple introduced its iPod, I don't know if you know iPod because iPod is one generation before you perhaps. iPod is a little device that people used to listen to music. When Apple introduced iPod costed $300 in the United States market. And it came with a tag made in China. But you know how much Chinese labor was gaining from that $300? It was $5. Just $5. So when we see a product from China, we would think that, oh, $300 worth export from China. Actually, it is not. It was exported from China to India, for example, an Indian market, maybe it was sold for the $300 worth, but actually it is not produced in China from that perspective. So China really focused on the lower segment of the value chain. It was using its cheap labor to assemble the product, to screw the product, or to package it, and so on. And that's how China grew. But then China grew advanced significantly. It learned the techniques. It started innovating by itself, and it climbed up the ladder significantly over time. There is no doubt about it. But the question is that whether India can fit into that shoe, or because China is no more interested in doing that low-cost manufacturing anymore, because India also have a lot of unskilled workers. Can India move to that direction? My answer is no. Why I would say no? Because we are a democracy. And for good, definitely for good, we are a good democracy. China is not. And what China did is that China imposed lower wages on its workers, and China could manage it because it is not a democracy. India cannot do that. Because if India imposes a lower wage on its manufacturing workers and invite all the foreign companies to come to India and invest heavily and grow its manufacturing sector with lower wage workers, it's not going to sustain, because we have an extremely highly paid service sector workers, IT workers, education sector in the public sector. These people will drive up the prices of the commodities in the market. And because of that, the workers in the manufacturing sector they are trade union, they are assembling, they will drive up, they will demand higher wages, and the wages in the manufacturing sector will go up. So India should not be targeting on that. So what India should be targeting on, that is why I wanted to focus on productivity. India should be producing more productive jobs and more productive segment of the manufacturing. And India, as I said earlier, globally, we are going to see a service globalization, because manufacturing globalization is going to be declining, and we are going to see a service globalization. And you all people, you young and vibrant young generation, you are all equipped with a high quality education. You are the future of India, and you will be able to drive that service globalization in India. You can replace my job tomorrow, because I don't have to be in Groningen to teach my students in Groningen. You can sit in Trivandrum and teach my students in Groningen tomorrow. So that is going to create opportunity for you. So if India really play a significant role in educating and upskilling its population, of course, that is a future for India. We know we are one of the youngest population pool in the world. So from that perspective, I think it's in India. India's future lies in educating and upskilling the population. So I think that is how the dynamics will play out. And looking at China simply by, okay, can we replace China by focusing on lower cost manufacturing and go on improving productivity and so on? I do not think so. That is not the way forward for India.
Thank you, sir. Next question is asked by Anupama. Technology is necessary for increasing easiness in our life. Sir, if technology replacing manpower in all sectors, especially in the service sector, it would be a huge curse to humans. What should be done to prevent that?
I think I have answered this question in the previous answers, but still let me replace that again. I have shown you four different technology revolutions in the global human history, right? And what do you think about it? So we have changed technology. More people were working in the 17th century. Then we have steam engines that replaced a lot of workers. Then we came electricity. We can't live without electricity anymore. So all the all the kerosene business went out of business, and now we are using electricity. And now then internet came in. So just think about the history from a historical perspective. Of course, technology will replace manpower. Technology will take off our jobs again. But that is why I'm saying why do we have to work a lot? We should be working less. Let technology, but see technology as a complementary thing. It is because there is a place where technology cannot replace us still. That is our intellectual space. Our ideas, our intellectual space, technology is still not there, and it will not be there. Actually, I'm pretty pessimistic about technology replacing our intelligence. Of course, artificial intelligence, even with artificial intelligence, we need human intelligence to support that. So that is why I keep on insisting that we need to invest more on education and the flexibility of people. We should be able to move along with one technology to other technology. Technology is going to change rapidly. And now, even if Anupama wants to believe that technology is going to replace manpower and I will not embrace technology, do you think that, Anupama, you will be able to do that? Because technology will keep continuing changing. And if we try to keep away from technology, the only thing that is going to happen to us is that we will be left behind and we will be left out. The world will move on. So the only thing which we can do is to accept the reality. And the reality is that technology will move on and people will embrace technology. And you are all sitting with the mobile phone now. So you are already embracing technology. So the only thing which we can do is that how we can go along with technology and how we can complement ourselves to the technology and how we can efficiently use the technology to move on and to live happily and to improve our welfare and social welfare, how to productivity and so on. That is how we should be thinking about. And we should not be thinking technology as an enemy, but we should be thinking technology as a kind of as a friend. And we should be taking technology along with us. That is how I see it.
Thank you, sir. The next question is asked by Devika Vinod. What are the effects of brain drain on productivity?
This is a beautiful question. I think it's difficult to answer in a few minutes, but brain drain has a significant influence on productivity. Definitely, negative influence on productivity in the countries where people are going out, and it has significant influence on productivity of people who are getting them. Let me tell you, actually, I had a slide in this one. Let me see if I have removed it. I had a lot more slide. Yeah, this slide. This slide is actually, do you see my slide, by the way?
Sridhar, we can see them. Yeah, we can see that.
You can see them. This slide, actually, this is an ongoing work which I have doing, and it's already triggering a lot of discussion in the Middle East. Because this is a slide where this is a more complicated measure of productivity. This is not something which I have presented to you because I cannot measure productivity of migrants and nationals separately using the kind of methodology which we used earlier. This is more econometric estimation. So what we basically did is that we estimated the productivity of workers, foreign workers versus national workers in Kuwait, Saudi Arabia. This is because these countries are increasingly embracing nationalization policies. They are sending off the migrant workers because a large part of their migrant workforce is from migrant workers. So they're sending them off, including Indians, right? Including a lot of Kerala people, Malayalis. So what is the effect of that on productivity? So that is the kind of question we had. And first of all, let me tell you that migrant workers in these countries are paid far, far below the national workers. Actually, in the second part of this chart, you have the wage differences between natives and migrant workers. And you can see the yellow bar, which is the natives' wages, are far higher. Like it's 80% higher than migrant workers in Kuwait, and about 60% higher in Saudi Arabia. But now you look at productivity. Migrant workers are far more productive. And it's actually 60 to 75% productive, more productive than the native workers in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. So which basically means that it is not easy for them to implement nationalization policies, because private sector companies will not be interested in hiring native workers because they are more expensive and they are less productive. So why do they go for native workers? They will go for foreign workers, unless, or they will leave the business and they will go out to somewhere else. Because these are small countries, small markets, they are not going to make a huge profit out of that, those countries. So that kind of, this is a kind of brain drain effect, right? Because the brain drain, how the brain drain affect productivity or wages. Because all these people, migrant workers, even though they are getting less wage in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, their wages are much better compared to what they would get in India or in their home countries. So that is the reason why they are going. This is a kind of, most of these people are unskilled people. As we know, a lot of people are still working skilled. So, but the brain drain question which you are talking about is more about skilled workers. Now, coming to the skilled workers, there is a lot of literature that really says that skilled workers, when they move out of the country, that reduces the productivity, because if they remain back, their productivity would have been higher. But from a qualitative perspective, that is a very quantitative perspective. From a very qualitative perspective, do you think that would be the case? Not necessarily, actually. Maybe there is some impact, but if I if I had stayed in India, perhaps I may have been less productive than where I am here, right? Because as I said earlier, what made Rajit more productive than me in my example is the environment in which Rajit is working, right? Because if Amartya Sen did not move from India, maybe he would not have got a Nobel Prize in economics. So the thing is that before just by quantitatively discussing, okay, brain drain is the reason why we are not productive, we should look whether our environment is good enough to keep these people inside. And that is, again, I come back to my original point. We have to improve our infrastructure. We have to improve our environment. We have to improve our education system so that nobody will move out. Because people are, Americans, most Americans are not going out of their country. Most Europeans are staying in Europe. Why? Because they have better environment here. They have their contributions are acknowledged. They have a better reward system. They have a feeling that they have something to do in these countries. They have something to contribute. So those kind of environment is very important to avoid brain drain. And then brain drain then keeping people back will contribute to productivity growth. That would be my qualitative judgment of that question.
Thank you, sir. It looks like we have covered all of our questions. We are really grateful to you, sir, for clearing our doubts. Now, I invite our faculty coordinator, Rajit sir, for the concluding remarks. Sir, please.
Yeah. Yeah, it has been a rewarding day for us at the Government College for Women Trivandrum, because it has been a great day, because the people who are nearing to 100, because that is the maximum limit which Google Meet permits. We have been around 100 participants for the most part of the lecture, and that's why and it's one of an interesting session, and it's a very interactive one too, because we have been able to get a clear idea on what is industrial productivity is about, and also about the digital transformation. And Aziz has been able to deliver it very clearly in a very vivid way. So it has been a huge help to the students, because they have been some of them might be even for the first year degree students in particular, have been hearing about industrial productivity for the first time, but they have been able to get an idea or a basic understanding on what the term is and how this is transforming the economy and all. So we are really grateful to Aziz for showing the patience in speaking to our students in a very simple way. We all know that you are a person who is working on a very advanced level, on a very sophisticated level, but you here has come to us to explain the terms and terminologies all in a very simple way, in a very simple language, by not using any jargons or econometric techniques, because it conveys the message to students. Actually, we have planned a 1 hour lecture, but now it has been more than 2 hours. So we are really grateful to you for showing the patience. And as you have rightly pointed out, there has been a huge difference between when everyone spoke about China's story. It is like comparing orange with apple, something like that, because they, as you have rightly pointed out, the China has been able to increase their output by 185 times, while we have been able to increase our output by 30 times only. But with the same level of increase in employment, more or less the same level of increase in employment, China has been able to do that because of, as you have already said, about the factory system and all. So your references on pandemic, as it has become an opportunity, and what the countries like India require is skill complementarity, and about the new emerging things like blockchain, cloud analysis, that all you have been mentioned. It has been a comprehensive lecture from your part, and about assisting using the artificial intelligence for those people, for those helping those with kind of people who is having the kind of challenges like autism, by citing the example of Sora Robert in Netherlands, has always been a kind of new piece of information for us. And we are really fortunate in having you. And also, on a very personal note, I have to say that it has been, I have been knowing you from your CDS days when you did your MPhil there, and you are a person who has always been adored and respected by your juniors because of the enthusiasm that you have shown in their works and the way in which you are helping the people and you are reaching out to the people. And that is why many of them are fondly remember their days and our association with you, even after 20 years of their studies. And it is one of the kind of nature that made those people think about you like on that manner. And we all now know that the patience that you have shown, the way in which you are very much enthusiastic in answering the questions, in taking pains in explaining this, and we owe you a lot, Aziz. And as I just want to say that because some of our friends are common, and one of my friend who is also a classmate of yours in your PG told me that when she approached you for a kind of online for assistance in giving color televisions for online education, you are the person who was instrumental in arranging televisions, more than 20 numbers, to Pattam government school. That is something which a person who believes in giving back something to the society is what I feel. So you are a person not merely as an academic, you are a person who is very much concerned about the society, and you always have in mind how to help the people, how to help the students. And it's a great honor for us to host you. And also it's a great opportunity for our students to know that by taking academics seriously, it has been able to go to places and to reach and to become busy, and also going places and also doing so many innovative new things. So you actually acts as a kind of examples that we have been able to show to our students. Thank you so much, Aziz, for accepting our invitation and for spending this much amount of time with our students. And I hope they all will remember this day, because it's and we have been really grateful to almost many of the colleges in Kerala has participated, and the students from Government College Kasaragod, Victoria College Palakkad, Kannur University, UC College Aluva, Maharajas Ernakulam, students, PG students from these colleges have also participated in it. And I express my sincere gratitude to you, Dr. Abdul Azeez Erumbn, for coming over here and spending your valuable time even in the midst of your strict teaching assignments and teaching schedules at the University of Groningen, Netherlands. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajit. That was very overwhelming, and I'm quite happy that I had a lot of questions. So that really says something, because all over Kerala, all these students who came up with a lot of very interesting questions. So that's very interesting, and I'm very happy. And some of those elements which you said is like CDS, that really contributes. I think most people know what CDS has contributes to, how much CDS has contributed to their students. So that's really good. And the reason why I opted to make this as simple as possible is because Rajit already told me is that it's from first year BA students to master students. So I know my first year students here in Groningen. So that is the reason why I opted to make it very simple. Of course, it's possible to do much more complicated ones, but I think I hope you enjoyed it that way. Thank you very much, Rajit, and thank you, Dr. 𝘿𝙞𝙬𝙖, and thank you to all those students who have been here all over the Kerala.
Thank you, Rajit sir. Next, I invite Arpita for a vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. Digital transformation and productivity is rightly an essential topic to be covered in this time and era. Dr. Abdul Azeez sir has enriched us with valuable knowledge and a wonderful presentation regarding that. It was truly an insightful session. We sincerely thank you, sir, for your valuable time and words. I also thank our HOD Uma ma'am, Rajit sir, and our teachers for giving us this opportunity and constant support. I also thank the coordinators and members of Ecowings for cooperating and making this a success. Last but not the least, I thank everyone present here for your participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arpita. So now we are winding up our webinar. Thank you all once again for coming.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot. Bye, sir.